Welcome to our maple tour for Day of Giving. I'm glad all of y'all are with us today and are hopefully hanging in all day with us and supporting our efforts to fundraise. Let me give a little tour of maples. You know, we do tours of maples here at the Arboretum pretty often. Our logo, our symbol is a Japanese maple leaf. Starting from back in JC's time, we still try and do this where there's a Japanese maple visible from any place in the garden. So it's a really important plant for us here. But we tend to always talk about maples in the fall when they're getting their great fall color, and they are amazing in fall color. It really spectacular, and that's what they're known for. Whether you're here in the U.S., you're going to look at the sugar maples, or driving to our mountains and seeing red maples, we always think about that. But in the spring, many of these maples, especially the smaller maples, the Japanese maples and others, are really beautiful in the garden. So I thought, let's talk about them at a different time. But I'll say, I was just noticing on my way home from work yesterday, I was just on Hillsborough Road, right here by the Arboretum, and looked over at a kind of a wooded area, and there were our native red maples, Acer rubrum, and they're in flower, and they have beautiful red flowers. They'll go, depends on the plant, it's variable, red to kind of a yellowy color. The red ones are really beautiful, and then they'll be followed by their little winged, whirligig seed pods or samaras, and those start red. And we'll see a couple of those during this tour on some other plants. But on really good forms, those red flowers can be beautiful along the sides. Pay attention as you drive along roads, and you'll see these tall trees with these red flowers, and it's amazing how few people actually notice those plants, but they can be quite pretty. Now, I've chosen to start this tour with really one of my favorite Japanese maples. We grow lots of Japanese maples here at the Arboretum, so I don't feel like I have to grow so many at home. I'm a collector at heart, like a lot of plant people, so I can do the collecting here for some plants. But this is one that I have. This is when I moved into a new garden about 7 or 8 years ago. This was the first Japanese maple I got. This is one called Mikawa Yatsubusa, Acer palmatum, Mikawa Yatsubusa. And when you see Yatsubusa on a Japanese plant name, it usually implies that it's going to be a dwarf plant, or perhaps I should say a more compact or slower growing plant, because like dwarf conifers, dwarf Japanese maples can get big. Give it enough time. So this Acer palmatum, Mikawa Yatsubusa, it's often described when it's in full leaf as being like the leaves being stacked almost like shingles. They're really close to each other towards the branch tips, and gives a really different texture to the plant. Again, gets great fall color. But what I love about this is a characteristic of quite a few of the Japanese maples, and this is a green leaf one. And you may see my preferences come to light during this tour. I really like green leaf Japanese maples even more than I like the red leaf ones. I'm sorry, I know that's heresy for some people, but I really do. But what I love in so many of these Japanese maples is you have the buds, the buds, as they open up, the bud scales, or what's right inside the bud scales, will open up, and they'll be red, even on these green leaf Japanese maples. So in the spring, you get this almost chartreuse green, this really bright green. And I think maples leafing out is one of the cleanest, most satisfying spring greens around. And but then it's surrounded by that red to give it even more contrast out in the garden. I just think it's one of the prettiest maples all year round, and even during the winter, that compact habit. It's not. There are some. We'll see some other small ones that's twiggier growth, and they're interesting, but not as pretty as Mikawa Yatsubusa in the winter. Really, just a spectacular plant. Now, a group of maples that I wasn't even familiar with until till I started working here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum were the evergreen maples. And these maples don't look really like any of the other maples that you're thinking of, because they have little entire leaves, almost like a weeping fig, the houseplant, Ficus benjamina, very similar to that. And at the Arboretum, we had, and we still have, a very big Acer fabri, Father Faber's maple. This is a smaller form of that same maple, but you can see this is a really nice one in that the new leaves that come out are tinged with burgundy. They'll go to green, and in a mild winter, the leaves will stay on all winter. This winter, this tree lost a lot of its leaves, and that's not atypical. That's actually a good thing for us, because if it's a form that really holds all its leaves, you'll tend to get more death on it. So we want it when it gets cold enough for it to go ahead and drop leaves and be completely dormant. So it's not flowering now, but you get this burgundy growth. When it flowers, this species, Acer fabri, is really, I won't just say the prettiest flowering maple that I've ever seen, but it is one of the prettiest flowering plants. It really is beautiful. You get these clusters of flowers that hang down that are red petals with little white stamens in there. And then as those turn into seed, you get those red little whirligig seeds that will eventually turn brown, but they start off red. And so when the tree doesn't lose its leaves, and you get that bright red against the green, and then it's just beautiful. So this is the other attribute of this, and this is a characteristic you can identify some maples with, is the trunks and the twigs are just beautiful green. I mean, I love that green that you see there. And it tends to hold that green for quite a few years. As it gets older and older and you get the bark to build up and be thicker, you lose that green. But some plants, it's just on 1 or 2 seasons growth that you have, something like a green twig like this or a colorful stem. But this will really go down into the trunk quite a bit. Just a great plant, and it's definitely one that can fool your friends. In fact, I was at a longtime Arboretum supporter and member, and he was doing a tour of his garden, and he said, "I want everybody to guess what this tree is." Weathington, you can't guess. And it was Acer fabri. And it actually, if I'd had to guess, it would have taken me a second because I'm so unused to seeing that in other people's gardens. But we do sometimes propagate these and distribute them. So there are probably some around in other Arboretum members' gardens as well. Another evergreen maple that I just absolutely adore, very similar looking when it leaves out, is Acer laevigatum. And, well, I'll have to admit, these evergreen maples are not very well known. And so sometimes those names, we're still trying to figure out if we have the right names on them or not. This one particular is from a seed I got from a friend of mine who had a nursery in Shanghai, or outside Shanghai. So Acer laevigatum, like Acer fabri, has kind of the same shaped leaves, these kind of elliptic, almost lanceolate leaves, relatively restrained size, maybe larger than Acer fabri, but probably 30 feet when fully mature. This is another one that will, in mild winters, it'll stay evergreen for us, but in colder winters with cold snaps, it'll go deciduous or partially deciduous. You can see on this one, it's got some leaves that have cold damage on there. Those will fall as the new leaves fully emerge. So typically Acer laevigatum is green. It may have a little bit of a burgundy tint when it comes out. Typically it'll have green stems as well. We grew out several of these seedlings, and it just so happened that this one comes out early in the season, it's even earlier than this, it's almost black burgundy. It lightens up as it goes along. The young stems are burgundy, kind of burgundy red. And it just, I can't say enough great things about this plant. So we actually selected this one, named it Hóng Lóng, which is red dragon in Chinese. And we've been growing it outdoors since 2012. So it's been in the garden for well over a decade. We've actually moved it at one point, and it is still just chugging along just fine. This is one that is starting to get into the nursery trade. It was offered recently by a big wholesale nursery that ships all over the country. So we are really excited that it's getting out there. We have it growing in some shade. If you get it in more sun, it's even darker, but I think you might have more issues with some winter cold. So I think it's best in some high partial shade. So I mentioned I have a preference for the green leaf Japanese maples, but there are really spectacular burgundy leaf ones, and I do grow some at my house. This is one called Chishio Improved. So it's a nicer form of an older one called Chishio. Sometimes Japan, they call it Shin Chishio, but the actual cultivar name is Chishio Improved. So this is actually one where the spring is the best time for it, I think. It's a red leaf upright Japanese maple, a little more widespreading than some of the other ones that'll go a little bit more up. But depending on the weather, the spring when it comes out, this can be like pink, like hot fuchsia pink, or it can be deep red, somewhere in between there. But whatever color it is, it really, like in the garden, it looks like a plant is flowering when it's leafing out. The leaves will get larger and it will settle into a nice burgundy red color for the season. Like all of these red leaf Japanese maples, it will green out some by middle summer to the end of the summer, and then of course you get fantastic fall color. And this is one of the ones that can get some variation in color pretty well. Like a lot of the red leaf Japanese maples, you have some reddish stems on there that are nice. I don't know that they're as bright and colorful as some of the other like gold leaf and coral bark maples, but still can be interesting. But just a really all-around great plant. You may also see, in addition to this this Japanese maple, one of the ways people do support us, and that's volunteering. We have a 10-acre garden and just a couple of gardeners, but we have over 300 active volunteers. They put in about 15,000 hours a year. That's equals out to 7.5 full-time employees. And they do everything from stuffing envelopes, manning our visitor center, painting fences, repairing benches, and of course, working in the garden all kinds of ways. Understand that not everybody can come out and volunteer with us at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. So since it's Day of Giving, I hope you'll consider making a little gift to the Arboretum. If we get 287 gifts, our board of advisors are going to match that with over $25,000. So we're not asking you necessarily to donate a lot for Day of Giving. We won't say no if you want to, but any gift will help us count towards that. And we're really, what I'm hoping is to get over 300 gifts today. I'd like it to be from 300 different people, but we don't count how many people, we count how many gifts. So if you want to give $5 3 times today, great. If you want to give $10 10 times today, that's great as well. And if you would like to volunteer with us, come and talk to us, because that's just as important as those funds. So thank you all for joining me, and we're going to head on to the next Japanese maple now. Okay, I've got behind me here a real special maple. You know, with the Japanese maples, Acer palmatum, we know they grow mostly either upright or weeping. And the weeping ones tend to have a wide form, and they are basically always the kind of cut leaf, very serrated edges. They call variety dissectum because they have these dissected leaves. This one behind me, which is a green leaf weeper, is called Ryusen. And what makes Ryusen different is that it has the more typical undissected foliage on it. So as it opens up, you have more of what a typical green leaf Japanese maple would be, but it's on this cascading form. I've mentioned flowers on Japanese maples. This isn't the showiest of the flowers that you'll see on there, but you can see those little dangling clusters, typically with red petals and then the white or yellow interior to them. So really a real pretty little flower. And when you look at the overall look of the entire plant, in the spring, you can see those hints and bits of red in there. Those are both from where the new growth is coming out, but also from these flowers. Now, unlike the other weeping dissected leaf Japanese maples, this one really wants to go straight down. So you can buy it. I actually have one of these that I grew in a container in front of my house for many years until it finally got too big for the container. I actually almost killed it because a root grew through the bottom and rooted into the soil beside it. And I didn't even realize that there was that reason why I'd never had to water it. It just always looked good. But I took it out and I put it in a big hanging basket, and I've got it in my woodland and letting it cascade over, and in a couple years it's just going to be amazing. And that one's just grafted very low, so it was really just cascading over a tall pot. This one was staked up to about 5 or 6 feet before allowed to cascade. You could keep staking one up until it's 10 feet tall and then let it cascade if you want. Could make a great entryway over a path or something like that. But this was a real breakthrough in Japanese maples, that broadleaf on the weeping form. And we're starting to get some variation in that, but really haven't hit it out of the park yet with like a red leaf one that has that broadleaf as well. Talked about the dwarf Mikawa Yatsubusa. Here we have another dwarf or compact plant. It's called Kiyohime. Kiyohime, while a dwarf plant, compact plant, is not necessarily for the small garden. I don't know if you can tell from here, but this is at least 12 feet across. But it makes this kind of low, almost tabletop of a plant. We have some smaller ones, another smaller one at the Arboretum, same kind of flat top. It's younger, it's only about 3 or 4 feet. Just talking with our horticulturist, Tim Alderton, today as I was walking around this morning deciding which Japanese maples we were going to look at, and I came across him right by that, and so I was looking at it, I was like, I think this is getting kind of big for this spot we have it in. We might need to move it. So Kiyohime does what a lot of Japanese maples do, which is they open up with, they're kind of green with red edges to them. It's really beautiful. And in some of those, one that I'm not going to show you, but that I really love, Sumagaki. Sometimes they call it the red fingertip maple because it'll have the tips of all the lobes, even during the summer, is really striking. So Kiyohime gets screaming red fall color. I mean, it is one of the most spectacular maples on a good year. Now, What's interesting with the Japanese maples, you can see that this is basically fully leafed out. Now, the leaves are still need to expand a little bit and get their color, but I can also look around from here because I'm supposed to be able to see a Japanese maple from anywhere, and I can see Japanese maples that haven't even started leafing out yet. So we've got everything from really almost fully out to almost not having started at all, which is kind of interesting because there are some groups of plants that will flower or leaf out very reliably at a certain time. And those plants are generally photoperiod responsive. So when the day gets to be a certain length, boom, they know to flower, they know to leaf out, they know to do whatever they're going to do. While other plants are more temperature dependent. And so those are the ones that will leaf out a little too early sometimes if we have really warm weather in the middle of winter. But it also means that if we stay cold, they don't start too early. And with the maples, they're variable in what those temperatures are, even within, one species like Acer palmatum. So you can get some variation. We actually had a plant, not a maple, but a plant we were growing that grown millions of them. They always are reliable flowers, spring flowers, and often in the fall. And we had one that would never flower for us, never flower. And so it was right in front of our education center years ago. We dug it up and moved it, and boom, it started flowering. And we finally realized it was because it was kind of half hiding one of our light bollards. And so it was getting light all night long, whereas this plant flowers in the spring and again in the fall as the days hit a certain length. So it can be important. And sometimes I've wondered when people have said that they don't have a plant that they just can't get to flower. Do they have an outside light that they keep on all the time? That could be the issue, but it's really hard to diagnose that when somebody sends me a picture of their plant and says it won't flower. What am I doing wrong? I'm like, fertilize it. Are you getting enough water? Is it getting enough sunlight? Never thinking to say, do you have a light that stays on all night? So think about that if you have a problem with one of your plants. Now, this is often what people think about when they think about a Japanese maple, the weeping form, the very dissected leaf. This is one called Pendulum Julian. One of the nice things about this particular one is often the weeping red leaf Japanese maples have kind of burgundy stems, whereas this one, the twigs are this really nice green. So you get a little bit of contrast and it really looks good during the winter. This is pretty typical of what you'd see. There's some that'll be darker, some may be lighter. But I also wanted to point out something that doesn't look so nice on this, and that's this dead foliage on there. And this is something people have been asking about this year. If you're here in the Raleigh area, we had just unusual weather pattern in the fall, and typically, Japanese maples drop all their leaves. They don't have these dead leaves hanging on there. There's nothing wrong with this plant. It's just we're seeing this on a lot of our maples. The leaves, they just got hit at the right time to stop them from abscising, separating and falling, but not early enough to just help them change color. It really was kind of a perfect mix of where they got hit. And so there are quite a lot of Japanese maples around the Arboretum that have leaves still on them. But what you'll see as the new leaves emerge, they'll tend to push those off, and that won't be a problem, really. And when you look at those, but some of those plants are right now and all winter, they kind of looked brown and shaggy when they normally would have had that really kind of beautiful trunk and stem character that you get with Japanese maples. So this is kind of an interesting maple. I mean, it's beautiful in spring like the other ones that we've talked about. The green foliage, the red dangling flowers, which aren't quite open yet on most of it. But otherwise, foliage-wise, it's kind of typical of Japanese maples. Still beautiful. I could show you every Japanese maple that's starting to leaf out in the Arboretum, and they're all beautiful. But what I find really exciting about this one is it's part of a group of Japanese maples that there are some people who are real aficionados of, and that's one with this unusual corky bark. They're often called pine bark Japanese maples, and we grow several of them. This is Arakawa, which is the classic cork bark Japanese maple. As they age and get older and older, you'll get even more of this thick, corky bark to it. Some people love it. Some people would prefer that beautiful, smooth green or burgundy bark. I'm really that smooth, beautiful bark person. This plant came to us from a nurseryman, a former nurseryman. He got smart and got out of the nursery business, and he loved these things, and he had a whole bunch of them, different ones. It's interesting, but I thought I'd show it to you, and you can make your own decision on whether it is a superior than the smooth bark. Now, this is a brand new, or relatively new anyway, Japanese maple. It's brand new for us. It's only been in the ground not even a full season. This is one called Acer palmatum Golden Falls. It's just coming out, but this kind of coral orange color to the leaves coming out is, it just jumps out at me. This is as showy as one of the really hot plants, Spirea double play candy corn, which has this kind of mix of colors to it. It's as showy as a lot of flowering plants. We planted this one up high on a berm, and we're gonna let it just cascade down, fall down, Golden Falls. But you could also stake this up and grow it taller. Even if you bought it as a plant, a low stake plant, you could choose a stem, kind of go up, eventually cut these other things down and let it grow up if you wanted to. But naturally, it's going to want to cascade over. During the summer, it has yellow gold foliage and then gets bright orange in the fall. Something kind of interesting about it is young stems are burgundy, and then as they get into their second and third, fourth year, they turn more of yellow, and eventually it'll turn green. It'll be interesting to see this out here during a full summer. Like I said, it's a new plant. My guess is it may be in too much sun. We may have to move it. We just really love the idea of it being here and cascading down. But often these yellow leaf plants, they really prefer some sun, some shade. And that's one of the nice things about Japanese maples. They actually are fantastic plants in park shaded spots, in woodland gardens. They really light it up. And that may be why I like some of the green leaf ones more than the red leaf ones, because the red leaf ones will go kind of muddy color earlier that way. And they also kind of get, in the shadows, can get a little more hidden than the yellow leaf and the green leaf ones. But really excited to get to know this plant a little bit more. Maybe I need to put this one in another pot and eventually have another big hanging basket with gold foliage. Okay, this is Acer palmatum Goshiki Kotohime. Like I mentioned with Mikawa Yatsubusa, this has kind of what they call these, like in Japan, they say they're like roof tiles, where the leaves just kind of stack on top of each other and give this congested look, very different texture to it. There is another plant, just Kotohime, which is very similar. Goshiki Kotohime has some, often will have little speckled variegation in the leaves as it grows. They need to be a little bit larger than this before they're really visible, but either way, this is the perfect plant. This in Mikawa Yatsubusa is kind of the perfect plant for a really small garden if you don't have room for a tall growing plant or that wide Kiyohime. It'll grow in say 10 years. It can get to 5 or 6 feet tall generally, maybe a little bit taller if you have really great soil and perfect spot. But it's also compared to others, very narrow and upright. So it fits in a lot of spots in the garden. A lot of times people always want to plant their plants their trees out by themselves and separate them out. But when you have these dwarf plants, you can put them into perennial borders, and during the winter they provide structure, and during the summer they're great contrast with colors. So people who join us often for our midweek programs know that I love vines. And I always talk about I'll put a vine on anything. At about this size for a plant in my garden, this is when I will plant just a slow grow, a moderate, small growing vine that dies back to the ground every winter. Often some of the small flowered clematis are perfect for that. And I'll either get one that blooms later when this doesn't have this great foliage, or try and get something that blooms very early that's going to complement these flowers. But I love doing that, and I love having the vines twine through there and just bring a little bit more to it. And I'm looking at this plant thinking, boy, that's just about perfect for that. Okay, we've got several of these golden leaf Japanese maples, and those are it used to be you had green ones and you had the red ones, and you could have upright green ones and upright red ones, or you could have weeping dissected leaf green ones and weeping dissected leaf red ones. But there's been a lot of change in that, and there's these really beautiful gold leaf ones. This is one called Allen's Gold. One of these days I'll look up who Allen is, but we got it from a local nurseryman many years ago, and he said this is one of the best. And of course he says that about all his plants, so you never know. But we took it, of course, and it really is turned out to be a spectacular tree. And you on this tree can see all the variation. When it comes out, sometimes it is just really yellow, and sometimes it's more coral colored and almost orange to it. And it really changes sometimes year to year. Sometimes in one year you get all of those colors. But it isn't really a stage of growth in the plant. It really is just how they leaf out. And then it's a nice yellow for the summer. It'll green up some. But for this show in spring, when we're out by the road, as you might be able to tell, when I drive by every morning, I look at this area, look through the gate, look at all what's blooming, what's not blooming. And this is one where I couldn't remember what on earth we had planted here. I thought it was a witch hazel in full flower. So after I'd driven in and gone to my office and spent a few hours answering emails, I had to come out here just to see which witch hazel it was, because I didn't recognize it. And it's a Japanese maple, and that's not too bad when we talk about leaves, if they can fool somebody who's been doing it professionally for 3 decades into coming and checking them out. Well, thanks to the magic of the camera, I am now dry and in different outfit and ready to continue our tour of some amazing Japanese and other maples in spring. So we're at another Japanese maple that I know I say it too often, but it's one of my favorites. This is a plant that there's some plants that I can just vividly remember the first time I saw them. They were just plants that were just in perfect shape, the perfect time, perfect plants. And this is one of them. And this is one that literally stopped me in my tracks and probably gasped out loud. This is Acer palmatum Higasa yama. And hopefully you can see this well, but the foliage has this incredible variegation, and it goes from this to even better. It's unlike there's some in the Ghost series that look a little like this right now, but when this gets older, it's just got this white edge around the leaf. It is so beautiful. It loses it somewhat during the course of the summer, but oh my gosh, we grow lilacs and things for forsythia for 2 weeks of blooms, and then have a nondescript plant. To grow something with foliage like this is just, it's so good, even if it goes more green as the summer goes on. So The plant is it's a larger plant. It grows into a tree. It's not one of those little tiny ones, but it is one that is definitely worth its space in my garden, at least. And you can see on it, it's got the leaves which come out. They look so pale till you come on them and you see the variegation. But then the vivid red flowers, which are just coming out, not quite open on there. So they'll actually even spread a little bit more, and you'll get even more color as you're getting more white in the leaves. Really just, it's unlike any other Japanese maple. And honestly, there are a lot of Japanese maples that I couldn't tell apart, but boy, I can tell you Higasa yama in foliage every time. It's just that good. Well, we're going to end on one of the maples that greets our visitors first when they come in the garden. It is one of the very first ones you see right inside of our pedestrian gate entrance. And this Japanese maple, we usually think all Acer palmatum of Japanese maples, but there are a couple other species that we put with there. This is Acer japonicum, and it's one called Aconitifolium. So it has leaves like an aconite. Which we don't grow a lot of aconites around here, but we could. It's as it grows, it'll have leaves that are larger than most Acer palmatums. But as a young plant, when it's first leafing out, you see these really delicate, lacy leaves. When it first comes out, and it's a little bit past that on most of it, you often get a little fuzz on the tips. I don't know if that'll show up on the camera, but you can see it a little bit here. And you know, not to get too esoteric, but when you come out and there's a little bit of dew on one of these that's just coming out, it kind of hangs on all that little fuzz, and it just, the tree glistens. And it's a bit ephemeral because it does that. And then as the sun comes out, and it really sparkles, it's drying it off very quickly. So it's a fun little experience in the garden. It's one of those things to pay attention. Like a lot of these other maples, it has these red flowers that dangle down, really pretty little things. Again, they're delicate little flowers, but they really show up well on the tree. The leaves themselves are green, but they have a little tint of red as they come out. They'll go fully green. Great fall color, which is when most people think of that, but I like all of these, I've said, I just love this time of year with the Japanese maples. So if you love Japanese maples, let us know. Post something on your Instagram, Facebook, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever your social medias of choice, and show a picture of your Japanese maple and tag the J.C. Raulston Arboretum and tag Day of Giving. But if you want to show how much you love Japanese maples, you can also go to jcra.ncsu.edu and click on the Day of Giving link and make a donation. We've said it before, but once we get 287 gifts of any size, our board of advisors is going to match that with $25,000. So really helpful, but just the number of gifts are super helpful when it comes to the university. They're always blown away by how many gifts we get at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. We get way more gifts than most of the entire colleges of the university. So if you do that, it's really helpful. You can give multiple times, but for the next hour, why don't you tell us when you give your Day of Giving gift? You can put a comment in there. Let us know what your absolute favorite Japanese maple is, and we're gonna go to take some live questions. So if you have questions, if you disagree with me, if you want to tell me a better one, you can let me know. I'll be joined by Greg Paige, our Director of Horticulture, and Jim and Lynn Swanson, who are they do a lot of our maple pruning, and they are just maple mavens. So, but let us know what your favorite is. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed a little maple tour. I know I did. You see I'm in my third outfit change if you go through that video. Luckily, no rain today while we're having Day of Giving. You can go to jcra.ncsu.edu and click on a link to go to the Day of Giving page and make a gift early and often. We are trying to get to 287 gifts. 287 gifts will unlock a matching gift from our board of advisors for $24,000. So it's very important to us. Also, having a big number of gifts is great because it shows the university that broad level of support that we have, which is really important. So the size of the gift doesn't matter. It's the number of gifts. So you can give multiple times. You can give for your pets if you want, your kids. You can give in honor of your favorite Japanese maple. We're going to take questions if you have them, but also just talk Japanese maples in general right now. They are our symbol, and anywhere in the Arboretum you stand, you should be able to see a Japanese maple. And to talk about maples with myself and Greg Paige, we've got Jim and Lynn Swanson, who are maple lovers. They have a beautiful, beautiful maple rich garden and have helped organize the Maple Society's meeting here in Raleigh a couple of years ago. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Love having you here. And on top of being maple lovers, they're also volunteers and come in and help out at the Arboretum. Blake, do we have a question to start? Oh,
Okay, someone was asking if the cultivar Ryusen could be kept from trailing onto the ground. And if you do that, will it create just thick branches at the bottom? And so I think you can keep it trimmed in so that you still have that nice fall, but it ends before it trails the ground. And sometimes with a maple, it's putting out new branches all the time. And you can sometimes prune to a younger branch so that you just don't have that ugly thick branch, but a young one can take over.
yeah. And Ryusen's interesting. It was the first weeping Japanese maple that wasn't a cut leaf. It was I've seen the original in Japan. Very, very cool. I think, Greg, you may have been with me when we were looking at it at a maple nursery.
We had a moment when we saw it.
Yes. I think they call it a hortgasm.
Yes.
And, when you get a weeping Japanese maple, you can either get it as a either low graft where it's low, or a high graft where it's higher, or one that's been staked high. And so if you really want it to go up, you can take that, but you have one that's low, you can take a branch and stake it upright to whatever height you want, and then let it cascade down. And while you do that, you don't want to cut off everything below, but you do want to slowly start cutting things back and not letting any of those lower branches get thick as you're waiting for the top to grow. But you don't want to cut it all off and go up.
I think it's important too not to do like that bowl cut, so you have a nice straight line, is to do it in a way that it looks more natural. At least that's what I try to do when I'm pruning them, so you don't have that manufactured
Cut off at the dotted line.
Yes, I hate that look.
It is a very vigorous grower,
Yes.
and it'll generate many branches every year, and there's lots of them, and they go to the ground, and it'll keep you busy, but exactly right. You don't just circle around. You look at the whole thing. It's like thinning out. It's giving it a haircut, and haircuts look better if they're not bowl cuts.
Unless that's your thing, that you like that control and you like everything to look like that.
Yeah, I agree. Gardens, I would tend to say, don't do that. There was a beautiful one in my neighborhood. Somebody else moved in, and now it's got a nice, perfect, clean cut on there. But, gardens are yours. If you like that, you're not hurting the plant. And, hey.
Follow your heart, as somebody here says all the time.
Yeah.
And I would again repeat, it's Day of Giving, so you can go to jcra.ncsu.edu and give. And there's a comment field there. You can put the name of your favorite Japanese maple at your garden or your favorite one here. Now, I'm not going to ask what your favorite Japanese maple is, but for each of you, what is your favorite Japanese maple at 10:50 in the morning today, because I know y'all, and I know it changes.
It changes a lot. So after watching Mark's video, and I love all variegated ones. So of course Higasa Yama is one of my favorites, but that made me think also of eye candy, which is variegated and right now has some pink tones in it, and butterfly, which in our yard is covered with pink. Very fun.
Two things with that before you go. One, eye candy is spelled IKANDI if you want it.
Yes.
And two, well, we'll go back to my second question, actually.
The springtime, I have to agree with Mark, is really the remarkable time for Japanese maples in the East. Oregon and Washington, their fall colors are amazing, but here they are like flowers. Even not just they have flowers, but the leaves look like flowers are coming out. And any variegated ones in the springtime, this is the time to go see them. Get up close, don't walk. So any of those like that, we have one that we really like called Ariadne. Came out of the Netherlands, beautiful pinkish color, and the veins are what stand out. And we have one called Tiger Rose, a pale green one that again the veins show up. They will when summer comes, they'll look more solid, and you lose some of that. But flowers, like flowers, they're not all the time. But you enjoy them while you can. But get up there and look at them. Like you said, Higasa Yama, you look at it, it's okay, it's a green tree. But you go up and look at those leaves. It's amazing.
So you mentioned butterflies and calico. These are very heavily variegated ones. You know, some people think you always have to prune everything. That's not the case. Japanese maples generally look better with some pruning, some thinning, but some of the variegated ones, it's really necessary to prune because they'll revert if you don't. Can y'all talk about that? Because we have some at the Arboretum that we let grow large so you could see the whole form, but they're not variegated anymore, basically.
Yes, if you have a plant and it's supposed to be variegated and it reverts, you need to cut out all that straight green because that is the stronger gene in the plant and it will take over. But the other thing is we like to keep some variegated plants with lower branches intact so that you can see those leaves close up. Don't limit up too much.
If they're too high, you can't see them. And we're starting to experiment with and some show more variegation if you prune them top them actually, and so Asahi Zuru is one that his variegation is very irregular, and you don't see it that much unless it's new growth. And Tim here at Arboretum talked about where he had cut one almost to the ground, and it just gave all this variegation. So
if you do that though, you're going to have to do a lot of pruning then, because to get a good shaped plant back again. How about you, Greg?
Like what everybody here has said, and if you hear me talk about plants long enough, I like things that look good winter, spring, summer, fall. But I love what you said about the foliage being nice right now. As we sit here, we can see foliage of different colors poking through the garden, and I like that. But one that always comes to mind, and one that I think we had selected for the plant sale this year, and there's going to be a big focus on Japanese maples in the Raulston blooms this year because there are so many here, and it's a plant that we're lucky to have good nourishment in the area growing. Emmett's pumpkin is a favorite of mine. I had that in my garden in Charlotte. I got it from a good friend of Mark and I's, Brian Upchurch. So it has all these things attached to it for me. And I like the size, I like the fall color, I like the form of it in the wintertime. I like the new leaves that come out. All those winter, spring, summer, fall interests in the plant are what really draw me to that. And there's something to be said for some of just the straight species, Asian maples too, that I really, really like. Those aren't to be kind of overlooked. but it's such a huge group of plants, and it's hard not to fall in love with all the different things that they do. And as I've been here in this short span of time, it's something that I've come to really appreciate, that the way that they draw you through the entire garden. I really like that.
Yeah, I agree, and that goes to something that we do. We do a lot. A part of our mission is that Acer japonicum emits pumpkin. The person that Greg got it from used to come here and would actually take cuttings. So again, it's Day of Giving You. So thank you, Jim and Lynn, for joining us. We have such amazing volunteers.